their mask, mute their phones, those who are watching online, just a few housekeeping rules.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon, viewers. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you're watching us from. Welcome to the virtual high-level event on the development of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. My name is Alex Simarawi, Executive Secretary of Global Water Bank of Southern Africa and Head of GWP African Coordination Unit. Before we begin, I would like to invite my colleague, Ms. Shamiso Kumbirai, GWP Southern Africa SDG Water Investment Specialist, who is going to take us through the house rules and procedures for this event. Shamiso, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Simalawi. Good afternoon to everybody online. The meeting procedures for today's event are as follows. Please note that the event is being recorded. Participants are requested to make sure that their microphones are muted when not speaking. To help guide the facilitators during our event today, we ask that you change your names on Zoom to indicate your name and the organization that you're representing today. To do this, please click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Hover your mouse over the name in the participants list and click on rename. You can then enter your full name and organization and click OK. During your breakout group sessions, we ask that you please make use of the raise hand function to be invited to talk. To enable this function, please click on the icon labeled participants and click the button labeled raise hand. Feel free to make use of the chat function throughout this call to share any comments that you may have. Do not hesitate to introduce yourself in the chat by typing your name, your location, and the organization that you're representing today. Language interpretation is also available in French and Portuguese for this meeting. You can select your preferred language through the meeting control bar at the bottom of your Zoom window. Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Shamiso. Your Excellencies, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to give a brief background of this event that is happening today. On the 11th of November 2020, His Excellency President Jakaya Kikwete and His Excellency Dr. Mayaki Ibrahim, Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDA-NEPAD, hosted a high-level event with leaders from the African Development Bank, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, COMESA, in this very room. The event of November 2020 interrogated why water investments are lagging in Africa and what needs to be done to narrow the water investment gap. The meeting also discussed the governance of the Africa Water Investment Program, AIP. Among other outcomes, the meeting reached consensus on the following: the urgent need to accelerate water investments to meet the continent's growing social and economic needs and narrow the water investment gap. The importance of reaching the highest level of national and African leadership in making the case for accelerating water investments. And finally, the need to urgently develop the AIP Water Investment Scorecard to track progress on water investments and to present this on a regular basis to the African Union heads of states. During the same meeting, the Development Bank of Southern Africa pledged to contribute funding towards the development of the Water Investment Scorecard. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, today we gather here to get inputs from stakeholders on the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. Since the meeting of the 11th November that was hosted here, we were mandated by His Excellency President Kikwete, Dr. Mayaki, and the leaders from the AFDB and DBSA to initiate a process on how this scorecard could be developed. We had regular meetings with a working group that was established comprising representatives from African Development Bank, African Union Development Agency, Amco, African Ministers Council on Water, Global Water Partnership, and also DBSA. The working group also met with other representatives from different sectors outside water. We met with colleagues from the Africa Malaria Leaders Alliance, AUMA, who have experience in developing scorecards, initially starting with malaria. They shared their experiences in terms of what they've been able to achieve over the years and the remarkable progress they have made in helping to reduce malaria infections on the continent. We met with colleagues from the Comprehensive Agriculture Development Program, CADIP, who have tested experience in agriculture, developing scorecards to track investments in the agriculture sector and regularly presenting this to the heads of state. One of the key lessons we learned, Your Excellencies and invited guests, was that it is very critical to agree as soon as possible on the type of indicators that need to be tracked, on the themes that need to be looked at, because it has to be precise and well measured, and it should be able to have to be of interest to the heads of state. So, Your Excellencies, we are gathered here. We've invited stakeholders to provide input. The global water sector is very large. There are so many subsectors: irrigation, health, water for industry. There's so many different subsectors: water for sanitation and hygiene. So we have gathered and invited guests from across the African continent and beyond who have experiences in these different thematic areas to provide input. The key lesson we learned about indicators from the other sectors also the fact that the process has to be stakeholder driven. It's not something that the few organizations can come together and develop on their own. It has to be stakeholder driven from the onset. We invite you to be part of this process and ensure a truly stakeholder driven process. We are very honored and grateful to have two distinguished guests and leaders on the continent to guide us and provide the high level political leadership as we embark on this process. His Excellency President Jakaya Kikwete, 4th President of the Republic of Tanzania and 6th President of the Chairperson of the African Union. His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, CEO of the AUDA-NEPAD and former Prime Minister of Niger. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor, on behalf of the technical working group comprising of Amco, Global Water Partnership, African Development Bank, GWP, and DBSA, to invite you to deliver your opening statement.
Okay. Well, am I being heard by everybody? Well, thank you, Alex. Your Excellency, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDA-NEPAD, Honorable Minister Herman Gustav Schlettwein, President of the African Ministers' Council on Water and Minister for Agriculture, Water and Land Reform in Namibia, representatives of the African Development Bank and the Global Center for Adaptation, Professor Anthony Okonyong, Director for Climate and Green Growth, Mr. Mikuria Asefao, Chief Finance Analyst from the African Development Bank, from the African Development Bank from Southern Africa, Mr. Chwene Rampele, Group Executive, Infrastructure and Development from the Development Bank of Southern Africa, Mr. Dario Soto Abril, CEO and Executive Secretary of the Water Partnership, Mr. Alex Simulabwi, Executive Secretary, GWPSA, Africa Coordination Unit, representatives from the UN, the World Bank, UNDP, UNICEF, WHO, UNIDO, FAO, UNEP, and invited partners from IUCN, SIWI, IWMI, and other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to welcome you all to this event aimed at kicking off the development of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. I thank you all for making time for this important meeting. Your participation gives me confidence that the water agenda still matters in a world where much attention and resources have been shifted to the challenge of our time, the biggest challenge of our time, COVID-19. Interestingly, clean water and sanitation are the first line of defense against the pandemic. Unfortunately for us in Africa, the pandemic presents a unique challenge given the fact that more than 300 million people are without access to potable water, and over 700 million are without access to adequate sanitation. The water insecurity is both a health and development challenge. We spend over 40 billion hours, otherwise productive hours fetching water. We lose up to 5% of our GDP due to inadequate water and sanitation. The scary part is that by 2030, Africa's population is estimated to reach 1.6 million people. This requires a 10-fold increase in water for human consumption, for energy, health systems, and socio-economic needs. The need for urgency, therefore, in addressing this challenge needs no emphasis, for we are only 9 years away from 2030. The pressure and demand for acceleration of investments in water and sanitation is obvious. It is therefore the only sustainable long-term route to securing this essential resource for meeting human needs and those of social and economic sectors for present and future generations. But the demand is huge. The African Development Bank estimates that $64 billion would be required in water infrastructure investment annually to meet the 2025 Africa Water Vision of water security for all. The current actual investments, however, stands at 10 to 19 billion US dollars per annum. We need to scale up so that we could catch up. You'll agree with me that there is no room for complacency. The situation requires us to scale up investments in a big way and to accelerate the pace of implementation of water programs and projects. It was in this spirit that in 2018, the 2018 report of the high-level panel on water convened by the UN Secretary General and the President of the World Bank, the need for an Africa Water Investment Program was underscored. Subsequently, the AIP was developed. It later was endorsed by the African Ministers' Council on Water, and it is estimated that $30 billion would be required by 2030 to fully implement SDG 6. It is heartwarming to note that in February this year, the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union adopted the African Water Investment Program. What is required of us now is to accelerate water investment, while what remains true, it is true also that we must act smart. We must bridge in technology and innovation to allow us to leapfrog where necessary and to get more value out of the investments we made. I'm saying this knowing that there is embedded inefficiency in utilization of resources and in management and execution of projects that make countries fail to realize commensurate return for their investments. As you may recall, last November, in the margins of the 13th board meeting of the GWPSA in this room, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, the CEO of AUDA-NEPAD, and I convened a brainstorming session, brainstorming consultations with leaders from the African Development Bank, the Development Bank of South Africa, COMESA and the African Ministers' Council on Water. We discussed the challenge of water insecurity on the continent and why water investments are lagging behind basic human needs and needs for economic growth and development. We underscore the fact that the Continental Africa Water Investment Program provides a good opportunity to be a game changer in transforming investment in water and sanitation, and to ensure mutual accountability for results and sustained leadership at the highest political level on the continent. We discussed what we can do together with other partners to mobilize significant resources to narrow the water investment gaps and sustain growth and development through adequate water governance, development, and management. The other question that preoccupied our minds was on how best to measure progress, ensure delivery, and encourage accountability. As we brainstormed, we took stock of what is taking place or has been taking place in other related sectors such as health, agriculture, and energy. One thing which featured prominently was the use of scorecards in those sectors. It has contributed to good data collection, tracking of resources, progress, and upscaling accountability for results. We asked ourselves, if scorecards worked in those sectors, why not in the water sector? The idea of having a scorecard was found to be a strategic opportunity to improve the investment outlook for water and sanitation under the existing robust African Water Investment Program. I personally find this very convincing. I can testify how useful and helpful scorecards have been to health and agriculture sectors. When I was president, together with the 9 like-minded heads of state and government, conceived the idea of establishing the African Leaders Malaria Alliance, famously known as ALMA. We did that with the intention of accelerating investment in the fight against malaria on the continent. But also, after establishing ALMA, a lot of work was done in the fight against malaria. But to track progress, we developed the Malaria Scorecard. It turned out to be a game changer in guiding and motivating action motivating action in the fight against malaria. Measurable progress is being made. I later experienced working with the agriculture scorecard under the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, developed by NEPAD under the able leadership of our illustrious CEO in the name of Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki. The CADEP scorecard has been a useful tool for promoting agricultural transformation in Africa. I also found those 2 scorecards very reliable tools in keeping a leader informed, make him stay alert and accountable. In return, it always makes leaders to increase vigilance and hold their officials to account for progress being made or lack thereof. I believe the AIP Water Investment Scorecard would therefore introduce political commitment, accountability, and efficiency in the water sector. In a way, also, it will democratize the water sector through enhancing transparency by involving a wide range of stakeholders and beneficiaries. These will be important pieces to complement what is already working in the water sector. The scorecard has a potential to catalyze the pace of realization of the AIP, given the fact that as a continent, we are lagging behind, far behind schedule. Through this redefined data-based narrative for water security, we can improve the investment outlook for water and sanitation and increase domestic financial resources allocated for implementing national and regional water and sanitation development activities. develop local financial instruments and markets, and mobilize more financing for the sector. Allow me to use this opportunity to commend the secretariats of AUDA-NEPAD and GWPSA and the partners for the wonderful work done on the initial work of developing the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. I urge you, however, our stakeholders to take a keen look at the proposals and add your valuable inputs. Your inputs are important since a successful scorecard depends largely on its design. Therefore, your inputs as potential users will be highly appreciated. This is the reason why this meeting has been called. I believe together we can do the same for water in Africa as it has been done in other sectors. I invite you all to join hands with us as we embark on this historic journey of developing the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. Thank you and welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Remarkable experience, inspirational leadership, and truly, truly, truly amazing. Your leadership, Your Excellency, is really critical, and we are grateful to have you as Chair of Global Water Partners South Africa, but also African Coordination Unit. Distinguished guests, it is now my pleasure to invite another distinguished and transformational, inspirational leader, His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDA-NEPAD. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, Alex. Your Excellency, President Jakaya Kikwete, Chair of the GWPSA Africa, my respect. Honorable Minister Herman Gustav, Mr. Dario Soto Abril, CEO Global Water Partnership, Professor Antonio Konyong, Mr. Chwene Rampele, Mr. Mekuria Asefau, Chief Financial Analyst, AFDB, distinguished representatives of governments, regional economic communities, and development partners in attendance today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor to be here as we kick off the implementation of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard, which will support the implementation of transboundary water projects by reinforcing mutual accountability between stakeholders. While much about the scorecard will be discussed during the technical segment of this meeting, allow me to speak briefly about the potential of a scorecard to mobilize political commitment and resources for the water projects in the PIDA Priority Action Plan 2, which will be implemented from this year until 2030. His Excellency President Jakaya Kikwete referred to how the scorecards in agriculture, in malaria, did help mobilize political determination. And I think this scorecard will have to play the same role. As you may be aware, the PIDA PAP2 portfolio, which we are implementing as the African Union Development Agency, is based on an integrated corridor approach, which emphasizes projects that improve rural-urban connectivity, promote synergies across infrastructure sectors, maximize job creation, and climate friendliness. Let me insist on the fact that Africa's geography in the next 10, 15 years will change enormously because our rate of urbanization is very strong. As such, the Africa Water Investment Project was selected as one of the transboundary water projects in PIDA PAP2 for its potential to contribute to transboundary and regional investments in water, emphasizing a nexus approach between water, health, energy, and food security. And as the development agency of the African Union, we fundamentally implement this nexus approach. The entire transboundary water portfolio, consisting of 17 projects, represents 23% of a PIDA-PAP2 project portfolio with an estimated capital expenditure of at least US $11 billion. We have corrected the weakness which was embedded in PIDA-PAP1 by integrating water projects fundamentally in PIDA-PAP2. As with other infrastructure projects, implementation of transboundary water projects is complex and necessitates coordination and collaboration across various stakeholders and regions. Water projects may appear to be unbankable due to insufficient resources to carry out detailed pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, resources to conduct studies on establishing common regulations, and resources to develop and operate regional coordination strategies. Furthermore, required documentation about environmental and social impact analysis, financial modeling and economic analysis, etc., needed to attract investments is not always current or readily available due to delays arising from weak coordination between member states. And as the custodian of PIDA implementation, transboundary infrastructure development, AUDA-NEPAD has instruments and initiatives. And I must say that the bank has played in supporting AUDA-NEPAD in this trajectory. These instruments are critical to the relevance of the AIP Scorecard, as they will contribute to its indicators and to unblocking issues highlighted by the scorecard. The instruments are in 4 broad categories. One is project preparation support, where we have SDM, our service delivery mechanism, a PIDA quality label, and a PIDA job creation toolkit. We want to have an African PIDA quality label. We don't want imported quality labels. We are able to construct our own PIDA quality labels. Point 2, risk mitigation and investment mobilization. So we constructed the Continental Business Network, which is a gathering of African private sector operators, the 5%, because when you take all the continent, their assets under management, I repeat, 1 trillion sovereign wealth funds, invest less. So we created a 5% agenda by linking with these pension funds and sovereign wealth funds in order to work on the de-risking issues and bringing them from less than 1% to at least 5% in terms of investment in infrastructure. And we, together with the African Development Bank, we set up the Africa Infrastructure Guarantee Mechanism, which could tranquilize the institutional investors, along with a de-risking strategy. Point number 3, political steering through the Presidential Infrastructure Champions Initiative. And I would like to highlight here the critical leadership role of President Kikwete, who is our champion in the water sector. 4, information management and knowledge capitalization. So what are our instruments? The Africa Infrastructure Database, the Virtual PIDA Information Center, which is called VPIC, because many investors were complaining on the fact that when they look for information on Africa's infrastructure projects, where do they go? Where do they get it? So that's why we created the Virtual PIDA Information Center. So effective utilization of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard to mobilize political commitment and resources will require that we pay attention to two critical areas. The first one is funding and strategic partnerships. Project preparation is critical, and we need efficient and innovative ways of funding prepared projects. We will not be able to move projects to bankability, investability, and this will invalidate the usefulness of the AIP scorecard. We need to develop strategic partnerships that will enable us to pool resources to support early stage project preparation. Point number 2, as a critical area, governance and institutional architecture. The institutional architecture for infrastructure development in Africa, AIDA, which is an African Union decision, is a pivotal part of our infrastructure delivery model because it shapes very coherently the division of labor in terms of project implementation, regional project implementation. Drawing on the lessons of PIDA from PIDA PAP 1, we have adapted the usage of this institutional architecture to clearly illustrate the roles and responsibilities of the relevant stakeholders and the associated instruments which I announced earlier across the entire value chain of project implementation. Considering the multiplicity of actors in the water sector, it is important that we follow the AIDA model, this institutional architecture, and clearly liabilities for implementation of the AIP. Reporting can be done to the African Union heads of states so that proper decisions are taken at the level of the African Union Assembly in order to support this process. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the AIP Water Investment Scorecard is a very valuable tool that will contribute to fast-tracking investments in the water sector through mutual accountability for results. It is important that the scorecard is developed quickly. We shouldn't lose time because we have examples of other scorecards and we have the technicians with the relevant knowledge to go quickly so that it can accompany the implementation of PIDA water projects from the outset and become part of the modus operandi of our delivery model. Its success and efficacy will depend in large part on the commitment of member states, regional actors, and development partners. And today's event is an important part of securing that commitment. My plea to the development partners is please to align with Africa's commitments, strategies, and approaches. I take this opportunity to thank you all for your continued support to the implementation of transboundary water infrastructure projects and look forward to the AIP Water Investment Scorecard coming into operation in the next few months. And I could not end without thanking President Jakaya Kikwete for his leadership and political, I do not say political will, I say.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you agree that the combined force of and wisdom and knowledge and experience of His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki and President Jakaya Kikwete is an incredible opportunity for the African water sector. We have always wanted to take water at the highest level. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your wisdom, and we really truly look forward to continuously working with you and your leadership. You've highlighted the importance of strategic partnerships. And we've taken that lesson on. Your Excellency, you emphasized that at the last meeting in November. And we have invited a number of strategic partners who would like to embark us on this journey. But before we invite them to give their short 2 to 3 minute statements, we would like to just play a very quick, short clip about the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. Oh! Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that very interesting highlight about the AIP and also the potential of the scorecard to provide transformational commitments and investments in the water sector. May I first now invite our first partner from the African Development Bank, as well as Director of Regional Director for the Africa Global Center on Adaptation, which is chaired by former Secretary General to the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon. Professor Anton Young is also Director for Climate Change and Green Growth at the African Development Bank. You have your floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you so very much, and I hope you can hear me. Let me start by thanking the Global Water Partnership and others for inviting the Global Center on Adaptation to this very important and timely event. The Global Center on Adaptation is a child of necessity. It has been established to promote adaptation at all levels of decision-making, to scale up and to accelerate adaptation on the African continent. The impact of climate change in Africa, we all know, is about water. If it's too much, we flood. If it's too little, there is drought. And therefore, efforts to address adaptation, efforts to address these vulnerabilities will also focus in the water sector. We aim to unlock adaptation solutions for millions of people in Africa in this sector. We have established the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program between the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation. What this seeks to do is to mobilize 12.5 billion in addition to FDB's 12.5 billion 5 years. There are ways in which we will cooperate with the scorecard and the things that it stands for. First, we know that the Water Investment Scorecard aims to sustain at the heads of state level. We will support the adaptation initiative, the commitments for adaptation in the water sector. Second, we intend to support the scorecard's aims to close the current investment gap that we have in the water sector. And what are we doing there? We're designing an innovative Build Smart project preparation facility that will be able to mobilize about $5 billion for investment in the water sector by 2025. Third, just like the scorecard's intentions, we're already working to create jobs and implement gender-sensitive approaches to building resilience in the water sector. For this, we will train, support, and enable African youth and women to lead in adaptation in the water sector. We're developing and implementing professional, technical, and vocational training programs on this. This will improve the capacity of over 800,000 youths within the next couple of years to take up business opportunities in adaptation in the water sector. we will also work with the Global Water Partnerships in establishing a community of practice around water. This is very important so that the knowledge we gain is not lost. In conclusion, the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program is thus about closing gaps by enhancing capacities and unlocking the many potential. Partnerships are central in every step of this agenda, and GC partners that have worked to develop the scorecard, and we say we are with you all the way. Thank you.
Many thanks, Professor Anton Okon-Nyong, on behalf of the African Development Bank, as well as the Global Center on Adaptation. Thank you for your support on the Water Investment Scorecard, and we look forward to work with you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, our next partner who is going to offer some remarks is Dr. Catherine Trovy, Water Practice Manager for East and Southern Africa from the World Bank. Dr. Catherine, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alex. Excellencies. So it's a real pleasure to be here. So let me try and highlight in 3 minutes from the World Bank perspective where we see opportunities for more gender transformative investments and why a scorecard can be such a powerful tool. So yes, as other speakers have said, we need more investments, and crucially, we need to ensure that existing investments in water are working harder. So at the bank, we have about $7.5 billion in active investments across 45 projects in sub-Saharan Africa. And clearly, we're not going to achieve the SDGs or shared prosperity if our investments in WASH, in irrigation, in watershed services are not inclusive and not empowering women. So in the last 2 years, we've actually played around with 2 very different scorecards that have fundamentally influenced the design and impact of our water investments at the bank when it comes to gender inclusion. So the first scorecard was established in 2018 with the aim of influencing finance ministers. This is when the World Bank launched the Human Capital Index. And this index quantifies basically the contribution of health and education to the productivity of the country's next generation of workers, particularly women. And so each benchmarking has been extremely powerful at getting finance ministers to invest more in human capital. And one of the reasons why it's been so good as an index, so it's slightly different than some of the rankings, it's a composite index, is because it simplifies complex issues into a single number, and it allows benchmarking and ranking one country against another. The second scorecard we've been using is our AUDA-19 commitments to our shareholders. And here we're required to have 80% of our projects being gender tagged and 30% of all water projects to create medium and higher skilled jobs for women. And here, to get to that target, again, back to strategic partnerships, we partnered with Equal Aqua to sort of really start changing the way we designed our project. So what do our new investments look like? I'll try and give 3 very quick examples in the time left. The first is we've massively increased our focus on institutional WASH, particularly keeping girls in school, which is a very powerful social vaccine, right? It reduces child marriages, maternal mortality, and fertility. So in Mozambique, as you know, 8.5 million school children were delayed by 6 months returning to school post-COVID. So we invested 50 million for safe toilets, but also for menstrual hygiene, which can help reduce girl dropout fourfold. In Malawi, very different. We're working with the Lilongwe Water Board to boost female participation in water utility workforce and managerial positions. So in the last 2 years, the board went from 0 to having 6 out of 10 board members being female, and workforce participation, female workforce participation increased by 40% by thinking about things like childcare and lactation facilities, flexible work arrangements, investment and leadership skills. In Uganda, we are supporting a $50 million farmer-led micro-irrigation program, which again is boosting women's participation. And here it's actually quite simple. We're doing it by insisting that both the heads of household, if available, are registered under the digital platform. And this means that women are receiving all the information about the scheme directly and can engage. So to conclude, scorecards can be a super powerful way to boost funding and also ensure investments are more build synergies with existing initiatives and leveraging partnerships moving forward. So pleasure to continue this conversation. Thank you very much.
Many, many thanks from the World Bank. Catherine, thank you very much for sharing your experience. And we indeed look forward to work with you to share your experience and lessons from the different scorecards that you've been working on. And indeed, the issue of gender is very critical to water and sanitation. And this is a key issue that is part of the AIP and will have to be tracked very carefully in the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. You've also spoken about the finance ministers trying to get their attention to provide support for water. Your Excellencies, our next guest is a Chief Finance Analyst from the African Development Bank Regional Office in Southern Africa, Mr. Mercuria Asefo. You have the floor, sir.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, protocol observed. This event is organized at a time when the water sector in Africa faces unprecedented challenges exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has disrupted economic activities and upended lives, tapering growth prospects. The impact and the public health measures required to combat them have heightened the awareness of the extent and consequences of the water supply, sanitation, and hygiene investment prioritization, backlog, and inequalities. Water of appropriate quality and quantity is essential for drinking and sanitation and for agricultural production. Water is important for energy, industry, and transport. Water supports economic growth and income generation. The water sector struggles to receive funding allocation in sub-Saharan Africa, where governments are pressed with struggling economies, huge debts, and a host of other socio-political problems. Although access to safe water is improving, the financing gap remains high, 3 to 4 times the current total level of sector commitments, estimated between 8 and 10 billion per year. The bank group undertakes to increase its support to its regional member countries to strengthen water, energy, and food security, promote the sustainable use of natural resources, and develop climate resilient water infrastructure system. Currently, the bank is developing its new bank group policy on water and also the bank group water strategy 2021 up to 2025. Helping the regional member countries to achieve greater sustainability, inclusion, and resilience in the water sector towards SDG 6 targets requires stepping up investments in knowledge, institutions, and infrastructure. This demands an increase in financing through financial viability and leveraging donor funding to tap other sources of finance. The bank encourages countries to leverage investments in the water sector by covering public, private, and innovative financing. The services provided currently by the bank are financial products and services through various instruments, loans, guarantees, grants, trust funds to regional member countries, and non-financial supports, which is convening and promoting innovative knowledge sharing to underpin bank financing. It has different financial products, both directed to sovereign or sovereign guaranteed operations, as well as to the non-sovereign operations. Besides, we do also provide other complementary service like the African Water Facility, which supports project preparation and resource mobilization, as well as the RUASI Trust Fund, which promotes rural water supply sanitation in the rural Africa. Up to now, our annual operations range between, on average, 600 million per year, about 10 operations in a year. It was a peak of 1.2 billion in 2016 and $1.1 billion in 2018. And the last year, due to the COVID, it dropped to $300 million. In terms of our current portfolio, we do have 104 operations in all the continent, totaling $5 billion US. And our current lending program for 2021 covers about $400 million US. The financing options for the SDG 6 towards 2020 between 12 up to 14 billion per year. The underlying water sector finance options in the sector, the bank is doing the following: supporting sector regulatory reforms, credit deploying guarantees, social bonds, and other instruments to crowd commercial finance, also to strengthen public-private partnership towards ladies and gentlemen, the AFDB uses different scorecards in the agriculture, energy, and the energy sectors to track our high fives, which is our long-term strategy. The financing gap, in conclusion, the financing gap in the sector is also huge, and more funds are required for project preparations. We strongly support and look forward to the successful development of the Continental Africa Investment Program, AIP, to facilitate mobilization of investments for sustainable development. And it's also our pleasure and honor to be part of this review and development of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard to enhance accountability for results. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mercuria Asefa from the African Development Bank. And thank you also for your support to collaborate with the partners in the development of the Africa Water Investment Scorecard. Mr. Nchuna Rampere is the Group Executive Manager for Infrastructure Division of the DBSA, Development Bank of Southern Africa. He attended the high-level event that was hosted by President Kikwete and His Excellency Dr. Mayaki in this room. And during that event, he committed to collaborate with Global Water Partnership and AUDA and Amco and other partners, and even pledged to provide funding. Mr. Rampele, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. His Excellencies, President Kikwete, Dr. Mayaki, and the colleagues joining us virtually. From the Development Bank of Southern Africa side, we still want to reiterate the fact that we are really in very great support of this particular initiative. And we really would want to then commit to say, you'll not work alone. And I think in the manner that you really requested, that we just give a tinge of lessons that will really surely be in our SADC Water Fund. So just to premise the approach, I think Dr. Mayaki stated very clearly together with the Excellency there to say, part of what we have seen can really happen is that we can leverage investments, but the biggest challenge that we really need to look at is transforming the investments into water. Because if we can talk about investments, if there is no water that comes out, at the end of the day, it is really hampered by implementation as such. So from our side, basically as the development bank, that's why we put also a much more emphasis on project preparation and trying to also see how we then begin to leverage internationally the funding to really try and see how we can fund the water projects within the continent itself. And hence the DBSA we've put, we've been accredited obviously from a Global Climate Facility Fund, which we're saying is one fund that is available to look at in terms of how we could really augment or accelerate, investment in water. So in particular, if we look at it, we thought it's important also to then, look at just reflecting one or two things that are really fundamental for the success of the water investment program. I think part of what we really have realized is that the policy and regulatory environment, both as we look at the participating countries, it's important for us to create that particular kind of a regional framework that will reduce lead times and agreements. And I think most of the time we find ourselves, like in our experience with regards to the SADC Water Fund, we spend much more time even to find an agreement. And that is basically going back to the political determination that really has been spoken about to say, why are we not just agreeing in terms of saying that this should really be what needs to happen? And I think we find much more time spent on agreements as water security in essence. So in particular, the issue around investing in project preparation, I've spoken about it. I think it's very important to say as a DFI, we are really committed to dealing with that particular aspect and say, how best can we really then be in a position to support, to ensure that projects are really quite very bankable. And I think the most important thing is leveraging on our expertise in project structure and to smoothen the transition from preparation to investment. And I think President Kikwete, are very correct to say, if we don't transition investments into implementation, then ultimately there's no water. We'll still be talking about scarcity of water. And I think the third portion of what I needed to just give a sense of is the broadening the funding instrument mix, because it's important for us to look at what is particularly available versus what we really are much more behind about the program itself. And that's why it's important to enable the sector for blended financing. And that for me speaks to the point to say we need to leverage the government funding allocations and draw the DFIs and private sector participation. This is very critical to really be in a position to ensure success in our programs. Largely, maybe to just like give the concluding part in terms of demonstrating how we really have dealt with especially the cross-border water supply projects. And I think it's quite very doable when you look at what we're really doing in the SADC Water Fund, the Lomahasha-Namahacha cross-border water supply project. We have got the Kazungula Border Town Water Supply Project. We are really at the stage where now we're really implementing these projects. And it has taken us so long to an extent that some of the funding, supporting agencies were saying we seem to be paralyzed in that stage. So I think we're trying to move much more with speed. And I think these agreements regionally is quite really very important in that respect. Again, we want to then emphasize to say we will really be supporting this scorecard. And it's important for us because at least we'll be knowing exactly where the gaps are. And we really would want to then ensure that we really track performance and investment in the sector. And I think we live to the objective of this scorecard, and we're really going to commit to, to support. And we're really saying, this particular scorecard is a must to happen. We need to really make sure that it happens. We need to make sure that by hook or crook, we make sure that this particular scorecard really is developed and we start to put it in implementation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rampere. Thank you very, very much. I think your partnership with us and your encouragement is really very commendable. All-round support from the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the Development Bank of Southern Africa. What else do we need? The Global Water Partnership at a global level appointed Mr. Dario Soto Abri from the 1st of March as the Global Executive Secretary to lead the implementation of a global strategy on mobilizing investments across the globe. Mr. Dario is going to give us some remarks. You have your floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Alex, and very much appreciated that you invited me to this very good event. And good afternoon to everybody who's participating, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests. I would like to start with a question, really. What kind of information will help build greater political commitment and leadership for water in Africa? And also what kind of information will help us change and save life when it comes to water? For us in UWP, our experience teaches us that collecting and analyzing data at the country level is key to identifying gaps in water and take corrective actions that need to take place. GWP has supported 61 countries to formulate their priority challenges and opportunities in integrated water resource management, IWRM, that you all know are familiar with it. These are based on collected information and that data that have become available, and then they became part of actionable strategies in each of the countries. To give you an example, the IWRM action plan in Kenya, I got a lot of support. I had received initial annual funding commitment of $500,000 US from the Treasury towards its implementation. And this is part of a consequence of the data collection and analysis that we've taken with the countries and with different partners. As a global network, indeed, GWP has supported the adoption of over 300 water-related policies, laws, and institutional arrangements and management instruments, accompanied by over 80 investment plans and budget commitments. I think more importantly for the conversation we're having today is to acknowledge that in Africa, the GWP is our partners. We're working through the Continental Africa Water Investment Program, and we're trying to influence over 3 billion in gender transformative water and climate investments to narrow the water investment gap by 2030. So quite an ambitious goal that we know we can only do it if we have good partnerships across the board with governments, private sector, NGOs, citizens, and the large. So going back to my initial question, what kind of information will help us build greater political commitment and leadership for water in Africa? I'm not sure which one, by the way. I don't have the complete answer, but I'm sure that the exercise that we're doing today with the scorecard will help us get there. What I can tell you from the heart, from my experience coming from also from a third world country like Colombia, is that we need practical data that goes beyond numbers and that tells us the human experience, what's happening for people. We also need data that is built from within networks and practical experiences. And we also need data that is disaggregated by gender, by whether people are young, by income. So it let us understand the needs of particular groups. And overall, we need data that help us connect the theory and the real solutions that we're planning to implement in water. So with this, I would like to tell you that I'm very, very pleased. Hope that I could have been there in person because we really, really want to transform information into knowledge, and that knowledge becomes the power to make a positive change in the continent. So thank you very much, Alex, for this invitation. I'm honored to be here, and I'm really happy to continue in this conversation that we have ahead of us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Many, many thanks, Mr. Dario Soto Abreu, and we indeed look forward to your leadership as part of the Global Water Partnership. And talking about gender and youth, young people, Mrs. Dina Ramoromandre from Madagascar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, honorable leaders and guests in your ranks and protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my greatest honor to be here with you today during this kickoff event for the development of this great program. My name is Dina Ramoromandre. I'm from Madagascar, and I am the newly elected youth representative on the board of GWPSA. I'm currently holding the position of Director of Legal Affairs and Litigation at the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Madagascar. My presence here as a speaker is the living proof that there is a will to bring women and young people to the table. Not so long ago, we celebrated International Women's Day, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated, "Too often services are delivered by women, but decisions are made by men." UN Women Chief even said exclusion of women in decisions that affect their lives is bad governance and should not be allowed. We know that women play roles in provision, management, and safeguarding of water. We also know that first victims to lack of access to water and sanitation are women. In addition, as an island, Madagascar is surrounded by water, and we are highly impacted by climate change with cyclones and a lot of water insecurity. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, starting tonight, we will make important decisions having impacts on the water and sanitation sectors for the next decade in our countries and in our region. Let us really bring women to the table and include them effectively in our decision-making. By effectively, I mean not only should we bring them to the table of discussions, but we should also put more funds towards grassroots projects that are designed and implemented directly by them. We need to find concrete measures to express political commitment, like for example, the establishment of a Women for Water Fund, the one that was put in place by an International Women for Water Year and the UN Women for Water Day in 2017. On the other hand, youth also have a very big part to play in the implementation of AIP Water Investment. As a member of the SEWIN network since 2019, I have never seen a group of vibrant and competent young people being so resilient and so innovative on finding solutions to tackle the bad effects of climate change in their communities. I cannot stand here and not advocate for them to get more funds and more capacity buildings, because we can have the best ideas, but they will stay prototype if they are not funded. The AIP has an ambitious goal to create 5 million jobs by 2030. Youth can be the central part to achieve that. For me, the key point in mobilizing political commitment and leadership to accelerate water and sanitation investments in Africa is to accelerate. I think to do so, we need to include the youth. They will for sure respond quickly and positively because they are aware of the urgency of water scarcity. They are ready to implement their projects, and we need to believe in them. Now, again, my presence here is the proof that we are going in that direction, and it is the right direction. Nonetheless, let it not only be a box-ticking exercise on the grand scheme of policymaking. Let it be tangible, and let's put our actions where our mouth is. We need to ensure the Water Investment Scorecard tracks how investments benefit youth and women. Thank you so much for your attention and thank you for this opportunity.
Many, many thanks, Dina, and we are very proud to have you on the board of the Global Water Partner in Southern Africa. You bring a tremendous energy and drive, and also we look forward to engaging with you to help us how we can work with the youth to accelerate and respond quickly in developing the investment scorecard, as has also been emphasized by His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, that we need to move fast. Excellencies, distinguished guests, we have heard partner statements, all-round commitments. But before we hear from His Excellency President Kikwete on his thoughts and reflection on the statements, the African Ministers' Council on Water is the custodian of water and sanitation policy in Africa. I'm very privileged to invite Dr. Paul Orengo, Deputy Executive Secretary of Amco, who is going to offer a statement on behalf of African Ministers' Council on Water on behalf of the President of Amco. Dr. Paul Orengo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Alex. Good evening, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests. I first wish to thank and congratulate His Excellency President Kikwete for his commitment and dedication in seeing to it that the African promise of a prosperous continent through water security and safely managed sanitation is achieved. The African Ministers' Council on Water, Amco, is very proud of the momentum with which the continental AIP is being nurtured to ensure that Africa attains its promise. We are particularly keen to see to it that the AIP Scorecard, which we are launching this afternoon, aligns to the Pan-African Water and Sanitation Monitoring System, WASMO, Amco's web-based system that helps in tracking progress across the water and sanitation subsectors, respectively. This complementarity approach will advance the spirit of collective action in developing Africa's water and sanitation sector. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, our visioning for the AIP Scorecard, therefore, is to see this grow to become a central repository for investor intelligence on water and sanitation infrastructure. The scorecard should be intentional with its indicators to include datasets that describes the investment readiness at various levels on matters water infrastructure. This is the only way to unlock the much needed intra-Africa infrastructure financing. While we have so much resources within and amongst ourselves as a continent to build our own water and sanitation sector, the prevailing investment climate has not been deliberate in attracting and retaining the private sector who, as you all appreciate, are perennial risk takers and movers of socioeconomic transformation in every society. The African Minister Council on Water, AMCO, therefore urges all those present here today to rise up to the occasion and make this historic ambition a reality. This is our moment for accelerating progress towards Africa Water Agenda. I will keep my remarks rather short and once again congratulate GWF family and His Excellency President Kikwete for lifting this dream off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Orengo, for those remarks on behalf of the AMCO President. Your Excellency, President Jakaya Kikwete, you have been Minister of Water, Minister of Energy, Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, President of the Republic of Tanzania, where you inspired transformational leadership, economic growth, and Chair of the African Union. You have heard these statements. What do you have to say, sir?
Well, Dr. Mayaki, distinguished participants, let me just speak as chair of GWPSA, but also as an African who has lived, who comes from the village, who knows the challenges of water scarcity in the village. You only take birth once in the evening. In the morning, you only wash your face and go to school. I have been to a boarding secondary school where we have been surviving on rainwater harvesting. They build gutters, they collect the water in a reservoir. But the water that was being collected will not take us throughout the school year term. There were a few months where there would only be enough water left for cooking. So we had to walk 7 miles every Saturday to a dam to wash and take bath weekly. Yeah, so that's the life. Of course, a lot has happened in the country. There is potable running water now in our area, but there are still many places that service has not yet reached. And this is the situation in most parts of Africa. So that's why when first I was asked to agree to chair the board of GWPA, PSA, I readily accepted because I thought if there is something I can contribute to advance the water agenda on the continent, let me do it. Well, I joined the board. We had our first meeting, virtual. Then I came here last November. And then, of course, we had this brainstorming session, really to see what we can do to increase investments for the water on the African continent. As I said in the statistics, 300 million have no access to water. 700 million have no access to sanitation. This is a huge challenge. Partnership is important, but developing a credible program that is going to address the challenges is critical. AIP has been developed. What is required of us now is to ensure that there is proper investment to ensure that the program is implemented. But of course, it is equally important that you should know the progress that we're making or lack thereof. You should know, you should create certain indicators that are going to guide you in implementation, but also to tell you if it's a kind of a measure that if you are not successful. This was the intention we had. Chuene Lampere was there. Dr. Mayaki was there. His Excellency Mayaki was there. I was there. Her Excellency Cheleshe Kapwepo was there, and several others who participated virtually. And we said, as we encourage investments, but we also talk about tracking progress. And our conclusion has been, if we can get a scorecard, it will definitely take us there. Well, we let that business in the hands of the Secretariat of AUDA-NEPAD and the WPSA. They've done a terrific job thinking through the issues, coming up with a roadmap with certain visions. And in this meeting, they've come to report to us the progress that they're making. What I can say, I'm impressed, and I commend them for the wonderful work that they've done, but they should keep on doing the good work because the work is just starting. Or we can say we are just laying the foundation stones. We are just defining the roadmap. So there is a lot more work to be done. But in this one, as we rightly did the first time, you need partners. We cannot go out, we cannot do it alone. yes, fine, alone you can run. But if you want to go far, you should work with the others. So now we brought in the others, and the statements, very brief, we have heard from all the partners who had the opportunity to speak have been very reassuring that there is commitment to see the AIP invested, but there is also commitment to see that there is progress. The desired progress is attained. So all that I can say is to thank everybody who participated, but to thank my dear brother, His Excellency Ibrahim Mayaki. Yes, he's a strong leader. He's one of the best that we have on the continent. I think after he took over leadership of NEPAD, we have seen a lot of progress. A lot of progress on the infrastructure side, a lot of progress on the agriculture side, and on many areas where NEPAD and now AUDA, African Development Agency, has been taken. So, Ibrahim, continue to do the good work. Your leadership is essential to make progress. Some of us have retired now, but we always continue to spare some of our time on retirement to make contributions. All the partners who spoke here, please let me say a big thank you to you all. Thank you for the assurance, for the readiness to participate. And I'm sure Africa will work with you, readily work with you to see this important problem resolved comprehensively. And when it is resolved, it has a gender dimension, because those who suffer most, who share the biggest burden in ensuring that the family has water, is the women. It's the women. They would wake up very early in the morning, when they almost half the morning, to go to a water point. In my tribe, we call Kulindila. You go to a water point, and from a small fountain, and water comes out slowly. To fill one bucket, fill the bucket of all the mothers who are present there, may take a whole day. And jealous husbands come and ask you, why has it taken you so long? They don't even bother to go and see the process, what these mothers have gone through. So if we succeed in having AIP implemented, marriages will be stronger. Yes, people will be healthier. Our economies will prosper, because there isn't enough water for the social and economic sectors as well. So I think we are doing a terrific job. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's pray for our own success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for those remarks. And indeed, talking about partners, we have many partners, Your Excellency, that are going to be contributing, particularly in the technical discussions, from UNICEF, from FAO, the International Water Management Institute, IMI, WHO. We also have partners from UNEP, the UN Environment, IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, UNIDO, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, UNDP CAPNET, a capacity building network of UNDP, as well as the Stockholm International Water Management Institute, SIWI. These partners are going to lead the discussions in the technical discussions. And now, let me invite my colleague from the African Union Development Agency, Dr. Towela Nyirenda, who is going to lead the discussions for the technical segment. Towela, over to you.
May I excuse you?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you very much, Alex, and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Towela Nyirenda Jere. I'm the Head of Economic Integration at AUDA-NEPAD. We are now moving into the technical segment of our sessions today, and I will allow our high-level representatives who perhaps may not be able to stay with us for this session to leave the meeting should they wish to do so. So as you can see, we've had a very engaging interaction in terms of the guidance and the leadership that has been provided by His Excellency President Kikwete, His Excellency Dr. Mayaki, as well as the other dignitaries that have spoken. And we're now going to allow the discussion to proceed in terms of really unpacking what the AIP investment scorecard will look like, and really honor the commitment to make this a stakeholder-driven process. So without further ado, I'm going to call upon Mr. Andrew Tabawira, who is the Senior Technical Advisor at GWPSA, who is just going to give us a short overview of the scorecard roadmap and development process. Andrew, over to you.
All right, thanks, Tawela. I'll quickly go over the slides because quite a number of these questions have already been answered in the high-level section. What we wanted to do was just to quickly talk to what is the AIP Water Investment Scorecard, why the AIP Investment Scorecard, and how. And I think this has been addressed, so I'll focus mainly on how would the investment scorecard be developed. The what, I think we already know it's a tool that is supporting the Continental Africa Investment Program as part of PIDA2. It will set benchmarks, tracking the gaps, the water investment gap. It will show the country level performance against high priority water investment thematic indicators. It's not going to be a static tool, but it's also going to be driving action. It will be developed by the partners that are noted, AUDA, Amco, AFDB, GWP, DBSA, and other partners with the aim of tracking the progress in attracting water investments as well. It will be presented, as was alluded to by His Excellency Dr. Mayaki, that it has to be aligned to the AIDA process, so presented to the Africa heads of states on a regular basis in order to mobilize political commitment for financing of water investments. In terms of why, I think this was well presented by His Excellency our chair for GWP. It's around tracking and identifying bottlenecks that need to be addressed to narrow the water investment gap. It's also around making a case for mobilizing political leadership and commitment in order to accelerate water investments, and also promoting mutual accountability through tracking progress and sustaining political commitment to action, and also serving as a tool that we can use to engage different investors, both public and private. And then the how, so this is the process that we are going to go through. The phase one has been around the mandate, and I think this has already been talked about at length in the high-level session. The stage we are currently at is around conceptualizing the water investment scorecard. We have been learning from other continental scorecards that have been referred to in the malaria and the agriculture one, the CADAP one. We've been consulting with partners through the working group in developing a concept. We have launched a tender, and a number of consultants have already submitted the bids which are being considered. Today, we are at the kickoff where we are engaging with key partners to start identifying some of the high priority issues that we need to track. The next phase will now be the initial scorecard preparation, and this will be stakeholder driven. We will be obviously working closely with our partners in order to propose thematic indicators that need to be considered. There will be country consultations moving forward to the approval of the scorecard. And then this will set up the long-term, which is the phase 4 long-term scorecard reporting system that will be established, and which will include piloting and reviewing and updating the scorecard. Apologies, I had to rush this to buy some time. These are just examples of the scorecards that we're being referred to. That's the agriculture one, and how it's presented to the heads of states. And then the last one is the malaria scorecard. The font is, the font is small, but just to give an indication of some of the scorecards that we were referred to earlier on. So I will end the presentation here, Dr. Tawela, and hand back to you.
So thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you for honoring the time. So I believe also that the presentations will be shared with all participants so that you can also have time perhaps to engage with some of the content in your own, at your own leisure. Without further ado, I'm going to call upon Ms. Shamiso Kumbirai, who is the SDG Water Investment Specialist at GWP, who will walk us through the process of how we will conduct the breakout sessions. Shamiso, over to you.
Thanks, Hoela. Okay, so in the next segment of the meeting, we're going to be going into 6 breakout groups for more focused discussions on what indicators are relevant for the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. The groups and facilitators for each of the breakout sessions are as follows. For the investments in WASH, we have Ms. Kelly Ann Naylor from UNICEF and Dr. Fiona Gore from the World Health Organization. For investments in water for irrigation and food security, we have Dr. Ruhiza Buroto and Dr. Inga Jacobs-Mata, who are representing FAO and IMWI respectively. For investments in IWRM and transboundary cooperation, we've got Dr. Gareth Lloyd from UNEP and Mr. Graham Chingambu from the DBSA. For investments in nature-based solutions and ecosystems, we have Dr. James Dalton from the IUCN and Mr. Vangelis Konstantinatos from GWP Med. For investments in water for energy and industrialization, we have Prof. Heng Liu from UNIDO and Mr. Simbini Tichakunda from AUDA-NEPAD. And for investments in water governance, institutions, and information, we have Dr. Temba Gumbo from UNDP CAPNet and Mr. Anton Earl from CIWI. The questions will be discussed, that'll be discussed in the breakout groups are, what are the 3 key indicators under each theme that should be tracked for water investments in Africa? And this is really seeing how we can take into consideration issues such as gender and climate resilience as well. The second is what are the sources of information for these indicators? And then the third is really trying to engage with the various stakeholders and partners to find out how each of the organizations present feel they can contribute towards the development of the AIP Water Investment Scorecard. So each group will have about 20 minutes to discuss these questions. Thereafter, you'll all be brought back into a plenary discussion and we'll be sending you out into your breakout groups shortly. If any participants are not automatically allocated to a breakout group, then please kindly check on the breakouts button on the bottom of your Zoom screen and select the breakout group of your choice. If you're still not able to join the group, please indicate the breakout group number you'd like to assign us, you'd like us to assign you to, and our tech hosts will assign you accordingly. All right, everybody, enjoy your discussions. Tech hosts, yes.
So please, if you haven't been automatically assigned to a group, you can still select the breakout rooms button from the toolbar and choose the group you want to join. And if you cannot find it, just type in the chat the number of the room you want to join. Thanks. Shamiso, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Welcome back to the plenary, everybody. I'd now like to hand over to Tuwela, who will be moderating the feedback session. Tuwela?
Thank you very much, Shamiso. And I think for those of us that were in the breakout rooms, the discussions, I think, were rather engaging. The time was rather short. And I think that there was a lot more that could have been done if we had had more time. I think what we will do is that we will also try to reach out through the form of a survey to capture your views and your perspectives on some of the aspects that perhaps we did not have time to go into the session today. But nevertheless, I'm sure that we have been able to get some insights in terms of the general thinking around the AIP, as well as around the indicators for the scorecard. So with that, I'm going to invite the various facilitators from the breakout groups just to share with us the highlights of the discussions, very specifically the 3 indicators, and then we will collect the other submissions perhaps after this session, since we are running short of time. So with that, I'm going to call on group 1, which was discussing investments in water, sanitation, and hygiene. And for this, I will call on Ms. Kellyanne Naylor from UNICEF to provide feedback. Thank you.
Great. Okay, sorry, I couldn't unmute and I was trying to signal, but I think the technical issue solved. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. So just quickly from group 1, we had about 30 people in our group. So just a few key messages. I think an important one was recognizing that the linkages between WASH and the water cycle, and that it was important, if we're going to look at this as an integrated approach, that we do make those links between climate change, water resources, and universal access to water and sanitation, which are of course very intertwined and cannot be solved separately. So we do need to look at both water as a resource and water as a service. And we also recognize, as mentioned by the president, that it's very, the gender dimension is also very much captured in WASH. So I think what the main point of our conversation was really recognizing that both through global reporting on SDGs, through JMP, GLASS, WASH accounts, and through processes that Amco is leading with WASMO, and through reporting back to heads of state meetings with the AU, that there are a number of existing systems that we can build on. We also recognized that within, it was important to look at how WASH is being integrated into climate policy with NDCs and NAPs. I think one important reflection was that while the focus is on tracking investments, we wanted to also importantly make the link to impact, and looking at how those increased investments are leading to benefits and sustainability and greater climate resilience for people in vulnerable communities, looking at the equity dimension. We recognized that the time was too short to select 3 criteria, but we did think it would be great if we could have another discussion with our group or an expanded group to dig a little bit deeper into these issues. So I hope from our group that I captured our key messages, but please add into the chat if there's anything else. Thanks very much. And sorry if the sound is not good. Over.
Thank you very much for that. So just for the technical support, there's a concern about the sound. I'm not sure if that's a problem from Kellyanne's side or it's a general problem, but just to alert you that there was that concern about the sound. With that, I'm going to move to group 2, which is looking at investments in water for irrigation and food security. And for that, we will have the representative from FAO, Mr. Ruhiza Jombo-Gordo. You have the floor.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We had a very lively discussion. We came up with 8 indicators, but we prioritized 3. One is the first per country. Each country has got a different irrigation potential depending on where they are located and so forth. So one indicator is definitely the irrigated area per country versus its irrigation potential. The second indicator is the productivity, not only in terms of crop per drop, but also nutritious crop per drop. The third indicator will be accessibility. And you can see that the first indicator implies climate resilience, because if a country is wet and it can irrigate more, but a country that is dry and is able to optimize its irrigation potential, it means that it's really resilient. The third indicator on accessibility focuses also on vulnerable groups. So the question to focus on gender and women is implied into accessibility. The second question on the sources of information. First, the information is normally collected by the ministries in charge of water, ministries in charge of agriculture, because they need to collaborate, as well as the ministries in charge of statistics. At global level, institutions such as FAO have got this database called the Aquastat, which is widely used for tracking how countries are managing their water resources with regard to agriculture, and it includes those indicators that we mentioned. We also have other global processes such as linked to the SDGs indicators, which we can use also to be able to follow how countries are tracking implementing agriculture, irrigation and water resource management in general. There is another tool that is jointly developed by IHE and FAO. It's called VEPA, and it uses satellite technology, which is also readily available, of course, to all the researchers across the continent. We did not answer the third question, but it is implied because the countries are the ones who are providing the data, and these global players such as FAO, IHE also have got similar information, as well as other UN agencies. I would like to thank the members of my group. We were close to 20. Not everyone managed to speak. Special thanks to the colleagues from the University of KwaZulu-Natal who were very active in the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you really for managing to cover so much in such a short period of time. Clearly, we can also see that there are linkages in terms of already what has emerged from the first group and the second group as far as the focus of the indicators. So that's a good sign in terms of the fact that we are recognizing what some of the issues might be. I'm going to call upon group 3 now, which is looking at investments in integrated water resource management and transboundary cooperation. And for that, Dr. Gareth James Lloyd from UNEP, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, good. So our group, we had a discussion on 2 of the 3 questions as guided. And amongst the 3 indicators we talked about were cooperation and planning as one, financing, of course, and gender aspects. And these could be covered in SDG indicators such as 6.5.1, which is a composite indicator and has sub-indicators which go into more detail in these areas. And of course, indicator 6.5.2, which covers transboundary cooperation. It was also noted that there may be other indicators linked to the Africa Water Vision, and it would be important to explore those and what the opportunities would be there. Regarding sources or organizations to be involved, there were many thoughts. People felt it seemed quite strongly about this from the discussions and the comments in the chat. Of course, international organizations have a role to play, but also regional organizations and national organizations, river basin organizations also have this information, research institutions, and of course, building on what it was already mentioned, we need to build on what already exists. The WASMO system that the African Ministers' Council on Water has for monitoring and reporting is also another source of potential source of information. Finally, I would just like to point out that that monitoring, of course, is super important, but monitoring isn't action, and the organizations that I mentioned in terms of sources of information, these are also actors, important actors who can help with this, with action and impact, which is of course the most important, and they shouldn't be forgotten. I'll stop there. I would like to thank my group. I hope I did your comments justice. If not, please include some extra comments in the chat here, and we'll make sure they were captured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, just to take note that the chat is still available for comments. I see some comments coming through, and these will be captured. And again, just to extend the invitation to everybody to make use of the chat to provide supplementary or complementary information. Group number 4, which was looking at investments in nature-based solutions and ecosystems. And for that, we have Dr. James Dalton from IUCN. You have the floor.
Great, many thanks. Thanks very much to the group also that participated in this. Unfortunately, we had such short time, but many topics came up. So I think more broadly at the overall indicator level, there are some that are fairly straightforward, but probably not very well documented, and therefore data would be a challenge with quite a lot of the indicators that were raised. Understanding source water protection, so where source water is protected, what scale is it protected at? Where is it in relation to the needs, for example, of basins, to better understand how that can be used as an indicator for investments, both in terms of investing directly into the nature-based solution, but also looking at that in terms of ensuring that there is a source that is protected for downstream water needs and other investments that may be required as well, both for water and for other sectors. So the level of protection, the source, that could also include groundwater, and groundwater was raised a few times to ensure that it is included in this process, not just surface waters. There was a feeling that understanding the ecological functioning of natural water systems is key to ensure that they're flowing, that they are healthy, that they preserve and retain the level of species that are required in them, but also the clearance of invasive species would be important to ensure that water still flows, and the health of the system being an indicator as to the health of the overall basin and water supply needs. For example, Ramsar sites and wetland protection, and that's also reported through national accounts back to the Ramsar Secretariat, could be one indicator. One of the things that's clear, however, is that in order for nature-based solutions to be adequately considered as a possible investment for water, is to ensure that they are included within many of the other breakout groups that are mentioned here on the screen. Nature-based solutions could be missed if they're not included, for example, in IWRM or WASH interventions or water for energy interventions, for example, both because nature-based solutions can protect investments, they can protect infrastructure, but they can also be affected by it. So to ensure then that an investment isn't causing damage that is affecting something else downstream, which may be in another sector. So a more holistic understanding of nature-based solutions is probably required, and how those indicators could be transferred between the different topics that the breakout groups have been discussing. One such possibility was natural capital accounting, which I think many governments are familiar with, both as a process to gather data and to understand what's available, but to also then use that to get a level of political commitment to account for natural capital at the overall economic level. And finally, I think one issue that probably needs to be understood more is the concept of nature-based solutions. I think that's needed is understanding what that means. And I think the solution is key here to ensure that we're not just looking at nature-based solutions as something to purely protect, but also something to protect because it's offering a solution. That makes it a much more investable concept, and it makes the system much more valuable, therefore, to multiple sectors. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you again for highlighting the need for a holistic approach, but also considering the linkages between the various themes that are being considered. With that, we're going to move to group number 5, which is looking at investments in water for energy and industrialization. Professor Heng Liu from UNIDO, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Our group have a very deep discussion, but unfortunately, due to time short, we are not able to have all discussions related to 5 proposed indicators. And now I think from my understanding, and also get some key points from our co-facilitators, and I would like to suggest 3 indicators. One is a proportion of potential hydropower are developed. So that means that's what investment in water for energy. So that's energy is, of course, that's not only the hydropower, but also it could be some cooling water investment, etc. So that also are related to industry anyhow. And the second one is industry water use efficiency. So that is, as we believe, is really very important for the industry to increasing water use, but the efficiency should be recorded, and also to understand the impact of this industrial water use for industrialization and then etc. So third one is the proportion of industrial water wastewater treatment. This is related to the SDG 6 and also SDG 9 related to sanitation and industry. So that will provide this with not only consider water water quantity, but also quality. But of course, our discussion also have some concern. All these indicators may be technical acceptable, but also should thinking about maybe in other way how the impact on investment. So anyhow, we will submit also other potential indicators for consideration. So our group is small, but we had a discussion as what we expect to answer all these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for reinforcing the message around the aspect of impact, which I think has come up several times from the various report backs. And now the last group, which was looking at investments in water governance, institutions, and information. And for that, I will invite Dr. Themba Gumbo from UNDP Cabinet to provide the report back. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Towela. Of course, our group handled the water governance, institutions, and information aspects of in terms of investment. I should say also we suffered from a lack of time in terms of going through the various aspects. Having said that, also it's a kind of not an easy group of things to come up with clear-cut indicators, but I'll mention a few kind of bucket areas, if I may put it that way, which were highlighted within the group. But before I go into those 3, I'll also highlight that there are a number of organizations within the continent which have come up with some indicators to this effect. So the idea is not to try and reinvent the wheel. For example, with Amco, they also have indicators. And also if we take a look at the the SDGs which are relevant to this subject. Also, there are certain indicators which you can take a leaf from. Now, in terms of the 3 areas which came out, starting with the first bucket, as I put it, there was a question of gender equality and social inclusion as being one of the main indicators in the scorecard. The second one being integrity, accountability, and trust building. It's been identified as one of the major areas which maybe at times deter proper investment. So there has to be investment in those aspects related to integrity, accountability, and trust building. The third one bucket talked about capacity development and also research and development in broad terms. And this also included aspects like, citizens science. And it was emphasized that these indicators as they are not an end to themselves, but the process of coming and measuring and tracking is the most important rather than maybe the indicators themselves. With that, I think I'll thank the group. We're about 24 of us. And I'll say, feel free again if you want to add via the chat if I missed one of the important points which was raised. So I'll stop here for now, and you can see some of the comments, of course, coming in the chat function. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm not going to attempt to try to summarize everything that has been said in terms of the report backs. I think we'll get that in the summary report of the event. But I think very important to note 3 things that I have picked up. Number 1 is that we need to use what already exists. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Where information, processes, statistics, data already exist, let us make full use of that. Number 2 is the linkages between the various themes and making sure that we are fully exploiting those linkages, but also fully unpacking them and developing indicators that are coherent. And then lastly is that much as we are looking at the aspect of investments, the indicators should also speak to the impact of those investments as well. With that, I'm going to thank you very much, number 1, for your participation, number 2, for your patience and having stayed with us to the end, even though we are about 20 minutes over. And I'm going to now invite Dr. Paul Orengo from Amco to give us the closing remarks. Dr. Orengo, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Towela, and many thanks to the different partners and group leads. I think a lot of discussions has gone on, very productive discussions for that matter, that will very much importantly inform the further development and shaping and actually the formulation of the AIP scorecard. I think we are clear in terms of the direction that we are taking. We are clear in terms of where we are coming from and the data gaps that exists that needs to be filled by this particular frame. I will therefore not take much of your time to say much, but just to thank each of the partners that joined the conversation here today. First, AUDA-NEPAD for supporting the conversations, the technical sessions, but also at the high-level sessions, the excellencies that made themselves available to open the session and to provide very insightful speeches and the strategic pathway that the scorecard is anticipated to take. Of course, the partners from different banks, African Development Bank of South Africa, and many others, who have all provided and shared with us what they're willing to invest, both in capital, but also in terms of the intellectual resources. We all thank you and value you, and we look forward to further engagements. Thank you so much, and a blessed evening to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to do a quick check, Shamisa, whether you have any last words, especially in terms of maybe the way forward as far as concluding some of the consultations.
Thank you, Tawela. Once again, a big thank you to everybody who's managed to join today. We'll definitely be in touch with all the various partners that attended to follow up on any additional comments that you may have, as well as engaging with the various organizations to see how best we can involve our various partners to come on board. Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.